Круглий стіл, який присвячений дуже цікавій темі інституційній, інфраструктурній, тому що дійсно наука не існує в вакуумі, вона не існує в якомусь ідеальному світі, у якомусь відірваному від наших реальних умов життя. І існує вона в якійсь певній інституційній системі. І ця інституційна система має такий важливий елемент, як фонди, які займаються, власне, опікуються спадщиною художників. І ми, зокрема, маємо сьогодні нагоду дізнатися про діяльність і роботу 3 таких фондів, які опікуються спадщиною Казимира Малевича, Олександра Архипенка та Ніколая Харджиєва. І ми маємо представників від цих фондів. Це Метью Стефенсон, який представляє фонд Архипенка, Крістіна Лоддер, президентка фонду Малевича, та Шенг, який представляє фонд Харджиєва, Миколи Харджиєва. І так, я запрошую наших учасників, please come. Ми з Наталією Шпитковською будемо модерувати сьогоднішню цю розмову. І побудована вона буде таким чином, що кожен з наших гостей зробить невеличку презентацію свого фонду, і далі ми матимемо можливість задати запитання і обговорити, власне, як функціонують ці фонди. І першим я би хотіла запросити до слова представника агента фонду Олександра Архипенка Метью Стефенсон. Прошу підготувати світло. Так, ми маємо презентацію, приглушимо світло і передаю мікрофон Метью.
Thank you very much. Oh. I'm okay. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome back. Thank you, Natalia. Thank you to M17 for inviting myself and also my colleague from the foundation, Alexandra Kaiser, who you heard speak earlier today. So I'm going to, in a few words, tell you a little bit about the Archipenko Foundation. Firstly, there we go. Firstly, I just want to say one word about myself. My name is Metью Stephenson, and I have known the Alexander Archipenko Foundation now for many years. I first met Francis Archipenko Gray in 2004 when I was still working at Christie's, the auction house. So actually my background is commercial. I was at Christie's for 14 years. And then I joined the gallery, international gallery, Pace Gallery. So I'm familiar with working with 20th century artists, 20th century estates, and have had some exposure, shall we say, to the international art market as well. There we go. So I love this photograph. So here we are. This is the young Alexander Archipenko in Kiev in 1902. And I can't say how great a privilege it is to be speaking about Alexander Archipenko here in his birthplace. As was mentioned by Dr. Kaiser earlier, Archipenko's contribution to the avant-garde and to art history is well known. Not least of all, his contribution, of course, to French Cubism, Italian Futurism, German Expressionism, and also at the beginning of the 20th century, his pioneering of negative space in sculpture. Now, the wonderful thing about the Alexander Archipenko Foundation is that it's still based in the house and home of Alexander Archipenko. The land that he bought in the late 1920s, the school that he built in the 1930s, and when I for the first time visited the foundation, it was to this house here, and we see the building in 1968, with Francis Archipenko Gray actually there in the picture on the balcony there. So it really has, as a foundation, a great sense of place and a sense of history. Alexandra spoke earlier, but I wanted to put this photograph up here to make the point that the foundation has multi-purpose, but it really is about, obviously, the legacy of the artist and research. And Alexandra is very much driving that research, as we saw in and heard her speak about in the lecture earlier today. But Francis has been really the keystone of the preservation of this extraordinary legacy, because when Alexander Archipenko died in 1964, it really fell upon Francis's shoulders to preserve this extraordinary archive. I came in much later, just more recently, and I'm not an employee of the foundation, I'm a representative of the foundation. So my activities are global, I'm working internationally, and I'm really out there to build connections with institutions, with collectors, and to continue to build upon that legacy. But there I am, in part, in promotion. Oh, point it this way, sorry. There we go. So, on Alexander Archipenko's death in 1964, there were an enormous number of sculptures, works on paper, terracottas, lithographs, and it has been very much the work of the foundation since 2000 to catalogue this extraordinary archive. And you can see us here, actually, the two warehouses. We have a warehouse in New York City, there's a warehouse upstate, where the sculptures and works on paper and paintings are carefully conserved. And it's a wonderful place for us to visit when we're planning future exhibitions, whether they are in museums or whether they are in commercial environments. Here we're looking at the extraordinary sculptor painting in the top left-hand corner there, oval figure from 1957. And on the right, a sculpture of Angelica, Alexander's first wife. And you can see some of the other sculptures, actually, that we mentioned in the lecture earlier today. You can see a dance in the background there, a terracotta from the 1930s. So there is a huge breadth of material in time, in materials. And of course, the work, as was mentioned earlier, the principal work to date has been to archive, catalogue, and research. And I think it's an extraordinary testament to the work and research of the foundation, and to Dr. Kaiser in particular, that we actually now have an online catalogue raisonné for the work of Alexander Archipenko. And sculpture catalogue raisonnés by themselves are actually very complicated, because we are talking about, in some instances, multiple editions of that sculpture. Here we have an example of two different pages of the catalogue raisonné. The first page here, you can't read the text so easily, but the idea is that you can really enter into the catalogue raisonné, look at the object you're looking for, and it gives you a summary background of how that work was conceived and how maybe it developed over time. In terms of the artist perhaps returning to it, maybe, as we mentioned, a number of the bronzes, for example, were made in the 1950s, but may have been made from plasters which were made in the teens. The other part, a very important part of the foundation, is collaborations with institutions to further scholarship and research, but also exhibitions. This is the traveling show, which started in 2015 and finished in the Oregard Museum in 2017, a traveling show, a retrospective. Part of my contribution to the foundation is also to find gallery partners around the world. And the first show that I was involved in organizing with the foundation, with the organization, with the support of the foundation, was this Alexander Archipenko Space Encircled, was an exhibition which took place at Eakin McLean Gallery in New York at the end of last year, and just recently closed, actually. And here we worked very closely with the gallery to understand which pieces we wanted to show, what story we wanted to tell. And it's extraordinarily important that we continue to do shows, I feel, like this. Here we focused, for example, on negative space in Archipenko's work. From some of the earlier pieces like Walking of 1912, but it was an opportunity also to include some of the later work as well, from the 30s, 40s, and 50s. It's also important for us to build very strong relationships with museums and to identify works which are perhaps in museum collections which are not on view. The three images you see here, the one here on the left is an image of Vase Woman 3. It's in the Norton Museum, which just reopened in Palm Beach, actually. And the top right-hand image, unusual image there, what you have is an image of a terracotta of boxes, which is on a pedestal, which looks like it's rather low to the ground. And interestingly, now that the foundation is very approachable, it's easy for institutions to reach out to us. And in this instance, the curator has reached out to us to say, how would Archipenko have displayed this object? Because we've put this object back on view, but we'd actually like to know the foundation's opinion about how this object should be displayed and positioned. And we'll see how they respond to our correspondence. The image on the lower right is boxes in the Cubist show, which Vita mentioned earlier, as being positioned later in the exhibition. And I think your point was well made, that we do need further research, symposia, to assist with the correct positioning, shall we say, of Archipenko's oeuvre when it is exhibited in such important shows as Cubism, because this object should not be in the penultimate room, it should be in the first or second room where the teens are being discussed. And Archipenko's contribution to Cubism could be best made. Oops. Oh, let's go back a bit. And of course, it goes without saying, the more work that we do on the catalogue raisonné, the more research there is, the more the work is available also for collectors to see, it does have an impact, dare I say it, on the market. And here's an instance of a piece which came up quite recently, which was, of course, was very well known to the foundation and generated an enormous amount of interest in the auction. This was just lot 3. I'm not going to mention the values maybe, but there were 5 or 6 major collectors competing for this object, which is Walking from 1912. Conscious of time, I just want to show as one of the last images, a work on paper by Alexander Archipenko from 1962, which was included in our most recent exhibition. And this is in a way I'd just like to signal, I hope it's okay, Alexandra, that in the future we want to continue the Catalogue Raisonné project with works on paper, because that really is the next big task that we have. And I would encourage you all to have a look at our website, because it's very informative and you can tap into an enormous wealth of information. Thank you.
Thank you for a very interesting presentation. We suggest that each foundation will first give the presentation, and after that we will have discussion, because for sure we have many questions, really. So I'm inviting Kristіна, yes, for you.
How does this work?
So you need to switch. Yeah, switch it on. Okay.
Oh, that's it. Right.
Here and press this
of the Malevich Society. It's very nice for us to be here. We have... Pardon? Oh, right, sorry. It's a great delight and pleasure to be here in Kiev, especially as president of the Malevich Society, and as myself to be here where Malevich was born all those years ago and whose birthday we are going to be celebrating tomorrow. I have the honor to be the president of the Malevich Society, and I have been for the last few years. I was one of the founding members of the board, and the society is a private foundation, but completely charitable. So although I'm a president, I have not much power and no money. I mean, I am not paid for my activities, so it's purely charitable. We're dedicated to exploring the work and increasing the knowledge about the art and life of Kazimir Malevich and of his entourage. We were set up... How do we do this? Is it this one? Oh, yeah, sorry. Oh. Sorry. We were set up in 2000 following the sale of some of the works by Malevich, which came back into the ownership of the family. And we were set up by the Malevich family precisely to promote knowledge about the artist. We invite collaboration with private individuals. Particularly, we are interested in translating Malevich's work and work by scholars, supporting scholars who are researching Malevich, and also publishing books. And this, of course, is what we did yesterday. We supported the publication of Tatiana's book. We have a website, and when you consult this website, you will come across grant procedures. This little element at the top right-hand side will indicate, you press on it, and it will give you various options. We don't support conferences organized by other people. We don't support exhibitions, but we will kind of be prepared to accept applications for grants towards publications. We have, however, made an exception to ourselves. We've organized two conferences, one in 2004 and one just in 2015. And we have published the proceedings of those conferences. Some of the contributors are here today. Miroslava contributed to Rethinking Malevich. And we hope in these volumes to make the latest research available to a wider audience. I have brought it's gone. I've brought the Celebrating Suprematism, which was our latest conference. Yes, this one. No, not that one. This one. Celebrating Suprematism. I brought it, and I am intending to give it to M17, so it will be here in the library for you to consult, or anyone who would like to consult. I'm showing you here some of the publications that we have supported. We supported the research going into these publications, and we supported the publications themselves. So Andrei Turovsky, we actually supported the translation of Andrei Turovsky's book into English, and we're hoping to put that on the website. But we also supported him by publishing the book in Polish. It's a wonderful book for anyone who can disentangle the Polish text. Very, very detailed about Malevich's family, his early life, his noble connections, his life in Ukraine. It's a fascinating book. We also supported the translation of Malevich's text, The World of Objectlessness, a new translation since the original translation into English from the German variant of the Bauhaus book leaves a lot to be desired. We have the initial proofs in Russian, and the new translation was based on these, and we supported this. This was published in Basel several years ago, in 2013. We also supported recently in 2015, the centenary of suprematism, the two-volume book based on Vakar and Mikienko's two-volume book, Malevich o Sebia. We supported the translation at great cost because it's an enormous two-volume work, and we also supported the publication of it by Tate Publishing. I'm showing you the two volumes that it was based on, the two-volume Tate publication. This is Malevich o Sebia by Irina Vakar and Tatiana Michienko. It's an incredibly detailed book where they compiled a whole load of documents concerning letters, etc., but from Malevich and reminiscences about Malevich. It's a very incredibly valuable collection. We supported the work that they did in Russia. We supported the publication of the Russian two volumes, and then we, as I've said, we supported the translation and the publication of it into English. We also work the other way. Sometimes we supported Charlotte Douglas's book, Swans of Other Worlds, which is about the origin of suprematism. We supported a translation into Russian. So here it is there, again, on the centenary of the development of suprematism. Most recently, we supported some of the translation of the original documents for the exhibition Chagall, Lissitzky, and Malevich in Vitebsk. This was for the Jewish Museum publication. We didn't want them to translate from the French. It was a wonderful exhibition in the Pompidou, and it was a marvelous catalogue in French. But so many problems arise when you translate from Russian into French and then from French into English. So we paid for the translations to go directly from Russian into English. Even so, Commissar came out as commissioner, so, you know, we can't get it right all of the time. And it should be Commissar, of course. We also supported the translation of this about the anatomy of the Russian avant-garde, which is a study into the pictorial practice of various avant-garde artists, including Malevich. And of course, as I said, we do support research not just into Malevich and Malevich's life and his career and his work, but also into life, work, and career of the artists who were his, if you like, his students and his disciples, his followers. And this is a book that we supported edited by Regina Hideko, called Lazar Hideko and Suprematism. And that's a very fine publication from 2014. I'm going up ahead of myself. We've also supported Kotovich's series of wonderful little journals about the classical avant-garde. And these are particularly valuable, published in Belarus, initially on a shoestring, and more recently with the support of the Malevich Society. And then we also supported Alexander Shatsky's 5 volumes of Malevich's collected works. We supported the last 2 volumes, and this is another work, Niechai, on the 4th dimension. In addition to supporting these kind of publications and translations, either promoted by individuals or by organizations, we've also given individual grants, and I'm giving you a list here. So since 2001, these are the people who've received grants. And we have supported a lot of work by Alexander Shatsky, who, as you all know, is a great Malevich specialist. And we supported her research, which came out as the Supremas book, now in English as The Black Square, and her book on Vitebsk, both in Russian and in English. And eccentrically, not only did we kind of support ourselves during the conference, but we also gave a special award in 2002 to 2003 for the organization of a competition for the design of a Malevich memorial area in Nemchinovka, where Malevich spent a lot of time. There was a dacha which belonged to the family of his second wife, And he spent a lot of time there, and indeed his ashes were buried there after he died in 1935. During the Second World War, the site became lost. There was initially a little black square, as you can see at the bottom. There was initially that was put up, but this became destroyed sometime during the 40s, during the conflict. And there have been lots of searches. People have found bones here and there, but it's not quite clear where Malevich was actually buried. Nevertheless, we paid for a development of a memorial site within Nemchinovka. So this is basically what we've done. We do not authenticate works. We do not give expertise. You might say, why? There's so many problems surrounding Malevich, but it's precisely because of this. We feel that we need to have a lot more information about Malevich's life, about his work, about the institutional structure within which he worked, about the structure of his own paintingly practice, before we can engage on doing things like expertise. Moreover, I think that any kind of authentication requires both, in fact, it requires the support not just of an art historian, but also someone who's aware of the scientific kind of structure of the painting, and so is really a cooperation between various specialists. And we don't feel, precisely because we don't have those kind of people available, that we can offer this kind of service to people. We do, however, direct people to go to people whom we value and feel might do a good job. Although I have to say, I think nobody is infallible in this area, especially Malevich. We also have not sponsored and done a catalogue raisonné, mainly because Andrei Narkov, who's been mentioned before, has done a catalogue raisonné. This may have been slightly premature, since knowledge about Malevich is constantly coming out, new knowledge. But what we are intending to do is to put on the website a series of selected works with very detailed provenances, etc. We are at the present negotiating with various museums to do this. So watch this space and keep consulting the Malevich website. The website is there. We were recently hacked, and people apparently were getting adverts for Viagra if they actually accessed it. That's been cleared up now, so you are free from any undesirable adverts. But we also seem to have lost some information on the website, so it's not yet back to functioning perfectly. But we would like you to apply for grants. Tatiana applied for a grant, and we were very happy to support her work. We are very happy to support individual projects, translation projects, and publication projects. So please get in touch, please come to us, and we will help you help Malevich. Thank you. I would like to present this book to M17, and I will inscribe it later.
Thank you very much. Dear Carolina, thank you for a great presentation. We will have more questions later. And now I would like to introduce Sheng from Hardiev Foundation. And we're really curious about your organization and how is your foundation is working and what you are doing.
Thank you very much. Also from my side, if it's okay with you, then I'll stand because it's getting a bit of back pains. I just had enormous computer problems, so I had to more or less reconstruct my presentation from an older version, which makes it a bit... do you have the... Oh, it's here, yeah. Okay, great. And yes, before I start, firstly, thanks to M17 for this wonderful conference. I'm a cultural historian. I wrote a lot about Russian cultural history, the beginning of the 20th century. I wrote a biography of Sergei Diaghilev, which was written in Dutch, but translated into English and into Russian and into French and Japanese, actually. In Russia, it's called Sergei Diaghilev «Русские сезоны навсегда». I'm also the representative of this foundation, which is based in Amsterdam. It's a foundation which owns an enormous, important collection of avant-garde art, which is stored at our longtime partner, the Stedelijk Museum, that I think you will all know, where you can see or study these works. I think most of you will know who Nikolai Kharchev was, but let me give a very short introduction. We see Kharchev here on two pictures, here to the right of Malevich, and over there at Nemchinovka, where Malevich had a dacha. Kharchev then being a very young man. He's from Ukraine, from Kashovka. He studied in Odessa and then moved on to Leningrad and Moscow, where he lived most of his life and where he started to collect and to become, actually, one could say, one of the first, maybe the first serious historiographer of the Russian avant-garde. He collected an enormous amount of artworks, but especially, maybe his greatest accomplishment is his large archive that he collected, which contains manuscripts by Khlebnikov, by Mayakovsky, by many other Russian poets and writers of the avant-garde period. Also archival materials relating to Malevich, to Matyushin, to many other avant-garde figures. An enormously wealthy collection of historical material that, of course, because of the situation that the avant-garde was in, the fact that it was not recognized, suppressed, and marginalized in the Soviet Union, was not guarded by official institutions. So Kharchev played a pivotal role in the preservation of the legacy of the avant-garde. Without him, we would know much, much less of the history of all these extraordinary artists. This was Nikolai Kharchev, so you see that he not only collected, he was very well acquainted with many of the artists. He was acquainted with Malevich already in the early 30s. And later on, he had contact with Tatlin as well, contact with Mituric, with a lot of other avant-gardists, and later on also with the estates, with widows, friends, etc., etc. He was a very secretive figure, which is understandable, of course, because of the situation that he was in, but which very much later on also was the source of many problems, because it was beyond himself and his wife Chaga quite unknown what exactly was in his collection, and he very rarely let people into his house to see his collection. In 1991, Kharchev decided that he wanted to move his collection to the West in order to preserve it, or at least that was the understanding, and he brought it to Amsterdam. As I think also the majority of you know, that whole process from the beginning on, when he tried to bring it to the West, till his death and the years after, were extremely problematic. It was a big scandal. Many people played a a very bad role in this process. It is also something that the Dutch government and also the foundation, which in the end inherited the collection and the archive, tried to do everything in order to get people guilty to stand justice. In the end, very little was possible for various reasons. I would not like to go into that in too much detail because I don't know, because the details are very judicial. Also because what the foundation is now is really trying to preserve and publicize the archive and the collection as good as possible. In 1998, the current legal entity started under a former minister, which also implies already the importance that the Dutch government attributed to the collection. A man called Job de Ruiter, Jov de Ruiter in Russian, I think. It was then brought over to the Stedelijk Museum. There was also already a first presentation of drawings of Malevich, because it contains a very large part of Malevich's drawings. Much later on, because the collection, the legal status of the collection was still unsecure, a new chairman came to an understanding with the government of the Russian Federation about the legal status, which is now recognized, so there's no difficulty there anymore. And during that process, we brought the whole archival part of the collection back to Russia, and it is now in the Regalie in Moscow, the State Archive for Art and Literature. And a full copy of the archive is still in the Stedelijk Museum and is open there for researchers. So if you want to research the archival holdings of the Kharchev collection, you can come to Amsterdam, to the Stedelijk Museum, and in the library of the Stedelijk Museum you can have full access to the archives, as you see in the last line. The current foundation is a legal entity called a stichting, so it's a charitable foundation, it's not for profit, as the Malevich Foundation is. And the artworks are on a long-term basis at the Stedelijk Museum, who regularly shows them. Not everything, of course, because the majority of works are works on paper, and of course they have to be preserved. They cannot be on show continuously. We collaborate with many institutions around the world who ask for loans. In principle, we always try to acknowledge these loan requests, because it is the specific target of the foundation to publicize Kharchev's collection and make it accessible as much as possible. During the last few years, especially because of the difficult history of the collection, we tried to make its legal status as solid as possible. And we tried to become under the so-called legal protection of the Dutch government, which is the State Service for Cultural Heritage, and it is now assigned as a state heritage, which means that the Dutch government will secure its existence, and also it makes sure that the collection, also under a new board or in a completely other political situation, can never be sold. It was quite unique that we could get that special status, because till now it was always only accessible for famous Dutch artists. So the Rembrandts of the Rijksmuseum, the Van Goghs, they are part of this particular cultural heritage status. Now, for the first time, also this enormously important collection of non-Dutch artists has achieved this particular status. Also, it guarantees its public character. So we tried to, through various instruments, make the Kharchev collection as legally solid and as publicly accessible as possible. The so-called statuary objectives of the foundation are the preservation, exploitation, and exposure of the paintings, the works on paper, the manuscripts, and the books collected by Kharchev, because there was also at least a large part of Kharchev's library brought to the Stedelijk Museum. It still is there, and it is gradually becoming part of the whole library collection of the Stedelijk Museum, so that these books that are very often very rare in Western Europe, mostly Soviet art historical books, are now also available for researchers. So this makes the library of the Stedelijk Museum certainly one of the best libraries for study of the avant-garde and of Russian art in general, certainly in the Netherlands. By far the best library on the subject, but I think in the whole of Benelux and a large part of northwestern Europe, the library of the Stedelijk Museum is the place to be for general research into the Russian avant-garde. We also try to promote scientific study of the collection. There is a small financial heritage as well. So we use the income from investment to support, for example, conferences. But the money that is available is a small sum, and so we can do relatively little every year. The whole board of the foundation is unpaid, as is the Malevich Foundation. We keep all costs very low. Still, we are looking for various ways to support scientific study, scholarly study, into the collection and into Russian avant-garde, or I should say, the avant-garde in general. Besides me, we have a four-man board. Marcel de Zwaan, who is a lawyer, is the current chairman. And then the rest of the staff are mostly scholars. Eva Rover, who is an art historian, she wrote a wonderful biography of Helene Kröller-Müller, the great collector behind the Kröller-Müller Museum in the Netherlands, which holds, I think, by far the best Van Gogh collection in the world. So Eva is a specialist also of the history of private collectors. And Professor Ellen Rutten, who is head of the Slavic department at the University of Amsterdam, is recently become a new member of our board. So we have a young, relatively young commander for this foundation. Back? Oh, yeah. Yes. Because of the computer crash, I cannot show you an extensive line of works of the foundation. This masterpiece, one of the rather few paintings by Malevich that is in the collection. As I said before, the majority of works in the collection are works on paper. There are paintings there as well, but not so many. Of course, so the most Malevich paintings that you will see in the Stedelijk Museum are acquired by the museum earlier at the late 50s from the collection of paintings that Malevich left in Berlin after the exhibition there in 1927. This is a very important work from the Kharchev collection. It's called Suprematism of the Spirit. It also holds a collection of photographs, of documentary material that still is in Amsterdam, so it's not part of the archive. Young photos of Lisitsky, for example, on the left, a famous photograph of Lisitsky in Vitebsk, in Unovis, and this is also a well-known photograph at the Unovis period in Vitebsk. As I said before, a lot of extremely important drawings, sketches by Malevich, which really complete the full collection of the Stedelijk Museum, and especially are very strong of the suprematist period. There's some works by Tatlin as well, works by Matushin, it's an important Matushin collection. There's Falk, Larionov. Kharchev was admired Larionov very much, so that is reflected in the collection as well, though of course Kharchev started collecting long after Larionov left Russia. Still he found a lot of works. There's an early Luchist work by Goncharova, an important work, and works by Rozanova, a good Rozanova collection there as well. Recently, because part of the collection, especially the library part, and there is also boxes there of clippings, the Stedelijk Museum, and I think it was Frank Lamoon, who's sitting over there, who is our specialist at the Stedelijk Museum, a man of encyclopedic knowledge. I will come back to him in a bit. They found a sketch by Malevich, which was obviously a preparation for the Englishman in Moscow painting, which is also in the Stedelijk. So this was a wonderful piece that we found, and I think the last original Malevich to be found, to come up as a completely new piece, recognized by Alexander Shatskich, among others. Yeah, we were happy to announce that we found this small work. This is a presentation of how a part, very small part obviously, of the collection was presented at the Stedelijk Museum a few years ago when there was a large Malevich retrospective. Large parts then of the Kharchev collection, more than 200 works, were shown, many for the first time, because of course there are also many lesser known artists in the collection. And it was a great success at the Stedelijk and wonderfully presented there in their new wing, or at least partly in the new wing. I don't know if that's the last. Well, I'm going to say something about publications, because obviously that has been of great importance to the foundation. The left, which is I think the first publication that was made in Amsterdam, also partly by Frank, then already working there, which is called Drawings by Malevich from the Kharchev Foundation. Then the foundation supported an enormously important publication called A Legacy Regained, published in St. Petersburg by Palace Edition and made by John Bold and Mark Konecki, among others. It contains a wealth of material also from the archives, letters from Malevich to Lisitsky, for example, and well, one of the first moments that larger parts of the archive were made accessible to researchers and a larger audience. 4 years ago, we were extremely proud to, at last, and I'm going to show it, this enormous catalogue raisonné of the collection. Almost all pieces are reproduced here. Also made by Frank van der Moen and Geert Imansen. It is a very important piece of work. Many years of work went into this book. Also, as I said before, because Kharchev did not himself leave longer lists of work. There are some lists here and there, but in principle, everything had to be looked upon anew, and it is a very important resource for study of the avant-garde in itself. It was published in both in English and in Dutch. We also organize conferences, and we now, for the last years, try to do that. We hope to do that every 2 years. There was a first conference in Odessa in 2004, because I told you that Kharchev was originally from Odessa. It was held at the Literature Museum there. Then we had a conference in 2017 at the Stedelijk Museum, and now in this year we will have a conference at the Regali, that is our longtime partner, because they now own the full collection of the archive, which will be held in Moscow for 2 days, in the 21st and the 22nd of June. And of course, invite you all to come there and listen to the lectures. The Regali also now is publishing, thank you. These wonderfully published and edited volumes done by specialists from Moscow, especially Tatiana Garyacheva plays an important role in these publications, in which all unpublished materials from the archive are now becoming public. It is really a wealth of material that is coming out. And even for those people who knew the archive or know the archive quite well, it contains many small miracles and unexpected moments. They are now preparing the third of these books. Second two have come out. The third, hopefully, will be ready in mid-June when we hold our conference. Well, in short, this is what the Kharchev Foundation is trying to do. We try to invigorate our presence, and we also try to, as much as possible, show his work, especially in changing contexts. So we are always very open for loan requests. If possible, many of the works are, of course, very vulnerable works on paper. So, unfortunately, we cannot always give what everybody wants, but we are very open to all requests, and especially, of course, we are very open to researchers who want to research the archive and the collection at the Stedelijk Museum. And as I said before, you don't have to go to Moscow to do that, because there is a full copy at 2 terminals available for researchers at the Stedelijk Museum, and it's a wonderful facility. So I invite you all to use that. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much. I guess this is a small present to M17, no? Yes? Oh, yeah. Well, this is really a great gift for us, because we are collecting a small library of the last editions here. So right now we have possibility to ask questions, and take into account that I am moderator, I'll ask questions first. Then I'll invite everybody to join for this session. You know, for Ukraine, it's very hard to say if we have such practice of making foundation and you know, trying to keep all the documents, all the archives, all you know, keep all the information about the artists and collaborate with the families. So it's quite rare practice in Ukraine. This is why it's very important that you're here and we can listen to your experience, how it is being done. So the first question I have right now for Archipenko Foundation, more history, how your foundation was created. What is the source of probably finance, how you keep alive, and how you do what you do. It's important for us.
Well, as I mentioned earlier, of course, I am the representative of the foundation, so my history with the foundation is quite recent. However, as we said, Francis Archipenko-Gray had inherited this enormous archive of material in 1964. And then it was decided in 2000 that a way forward would be to create a foundation. But the foundation has essentially been funded by the family. It hasn't had external financing. It is sustaining itself, actually. So the only income the foundation has come from its expertise, for example, and that's actually it. And then over the years, of course, there have been very, very selective sales from the foundation and from the family, and that has contributed at times to sustainability. But I think one of the things that's common to all foundations is to find long-term sustainability and how foundations in the future will support themselves.
Do you receive any income from the royalty when the work is being resold on the auction, for instance? Like the foundation received this kind of income to support its activities?
That's actually a question that I'd rather ask to Alexandra Kaiser, who's in the audience, because we do not receive a royalty when things are sold outside of Europe, for example, and there are a number of sales in the United States, but we do not receive a royalty for that.
Only in the United States, or
Not in the United States. You have something called artist resale right, but Archipenko is not subject to artist resale right in the United States, for example.
Mm-hmm. Did you have, it's a bit technical question, of course, did you have some kind of fund which was left by the family for support of the foundation, or you need to do fundraising to receive your support for the foundation?
As I mentioned, in a way, we are a family, and it's an estate, so the funding came from the family and from the estate originally. That's what initiated the setting up of a foundation.
Okay. So I guess it's also very important that the family is being involved in this process, because, for instance, in Ukraine we know some prominent artists, but unfortunately families cannot afford to support and create their foundations in here or abroad, so it's an interesting experience. Thank you. Going back to the activities of foundation, so you give expertise, and what's very important, that you do it absolutely transparent, you put it online, and your catalog raisonné is being expanded, so you're still expecting for works to be shown to you, and you are open to export it and to expand your catalog raisonné. It's an ongoing process, right?
It's an ongoing process, and that's one of the reasons why the catalog raisonné, of course, is online. It allows us to continue this process of research. It's very rare today that a completely unknown work appears on the market that we're approached with, but it's not impossible. The website describes in great detail the process and the protocol for expertise. Works do need to be examined in the flesh, first-hand examination, but it's absolutely crucial that those works are researched in the archive of the foundation. So it's very rare that there's a work which doesn't have archival material that we haven't seen before. It's not impossible, but we have a process for it.
So if we come to Archipenko Foundation, we actually understand that it's almost the last point to check the to make the expertise of the work. So if Archipinka Foundation says or tells that this is a real work, it's admitted by all the museums, by everybody. Or you still have some arguments.
I would encourage you to go onto the Catalogue Raisonné, which is online and is a great resource. And it is the fruit of so many years of research that it's quite likely that you can research the piece you're looking for online, because that's almost everything that we know about the piece is online now. If research is ongoing, it says that the research is ongoing.
And probably last question from my side. If, for instance, some Ukrainian or Russian collectors, they want to check their work, what are the steps they should do?
Archipenko.org. go online. The process is there. But invariably that you will need to put all the information that you know about that work, go through that process of documentation, sending that to the right email address at the foundation, and then they will reply to you.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
One more question right now to Kristіна. Kristіna, we know that actually your foundation, by probably the direction, is a bit different from Archipinka, although Archipinka probably covers expertise and also support of projects, editions, but for Malevich Society, you mainly support scientific work. For expertise as well, so it's, as I mentioned, Alexandra is the most influential and probably, I cannot say the best expert, but everybody knows that if Alexandra told that this is Malevich, so this is real Malevich. My question is, have you been involved in any, arguments, or do you support, or you don't support, or you don't participate in any litigations? For instance, about the last scandal in Ghent, and I read at your website the letter which was signed by many institutions about this exhibition. So what's usually your position? Or you say that you mainly do support research, but you never involved in any kind of such things.
No, we try to avoid those kind of scandals. There is enough going on, and there are people who are more than happy to be engaged. But the Malevich Society as a society, and that's apart from the individuals that compose the board, the society as a society stands aloof from that kind of activity, really. We promote solid scholarship, whether by an institution or an individual, translation and publication. But no, we don't get involved. And as an individual, I might do, but as the president of the society, I would not like to put the society in that position, basically.
Thank you.
We stay objective as far as possible.
Thank you. We were expecting Konstantin Akincher also. He will be coming tomorrow. And we are expecting for his lecture connected with different cases of litigation concerning the avant-garde. And my question to Shen, Kharjiv, it's almost detective story. I read so much information about it when he escaped from Russia with his archives, and Gallery Murzhnitskaya was helping him to do that, and that there were some pieces which were actually missed from his collection. And my question was, you just mentioned that we are still working on legitimacy of the collection for foundation. Why is that? Because if it's Kharjiv Foundation, it means that Kharjiv, he gave the start for the foundation, and foundation owns all the legacy for all these materials. Why still Stedelijk cannot show all the pieces in the collection? Or I'm wrong?
No, maybe I was not clear. The whole legitimacy question has completely been solved. So even with the Russian Federation, with the Dutch tax services as well. It's a long story, but no, all questions of legitimacy have been solved now, actually for, I think, 8 years or so, since it's at least was acknowledged by the Russian Federation, which was the last step that we had to take. Now, what I said is that because of the majority of works is works on paper, they just cannot practically be shown continuously in the museum because of conservation principles that are the same all over the world. So that's the main reason, and also because the collection is extremely large. So and many of the pieces are from lesser known artists. So regularly they would only be shown in some kind of context. So there's, for example, as an example, an interesting collection of the son of Falk, Valery Falk, who in itself is not a major artist, but they are interesting works. At the same time, they are not the kind of museum pieces that a regular museum goer would expect in the Stedelijk Museum. So for those kind of pieces, we hope to engage possibilities to show them in a certain context in which they can thrive and get more meaning. But this is, of course, these are marginal things in our collection. Of course, the majority of works, the Maleviches, the Machushins, the Tatlins, are of world-class quality and are shown in principle as much as possible.
Thank you. But well, I once read that actually about the Murzhnitska gallery and about the works which were missed during when Kharjiv was moving to your country. So have you tried somehow to investigate the history? I mean, what happened to the works and how you can rediscover some, facts and some pieces which were missed?
Not this board, but earlier boards have tried to do so. The enormous problem there was that Kharjiv did not leave a complete lists of everything that he owned, and he also sold works himself. Because of these two reasons, it has been almost impossible to see what was missing when, in the end, everything arrived at the Stedelijk Museum. So we did various approaches, and also we had a large legal report written. After that, the Dutch police also was involved in it, in ways to see if, for example, pieces would come on the market that were either attributed to belonging to the Kharjiv Foundation or to the Kharjiv collection, or were thought to belong to the Kharjiv collection, if we could claim them for some reason. And that report made it quite clear that it's almost impossible, that we just don't have enough proof to do that. We are still, almost every year, various times a year, we get letters or phone calls from people who claim that they have pieces of the Kharjiv Foundation, of Kharjiv collection, and try to, through us, obtain a kind of legitimacy of these works. We never do that, even with people who are very trustworthy, so we do not recognize anything that claims to become from the Kharjiv collection without any proof from support from other specialists, especially because of this reason, because we do not want to be a party in this, and we cannot be a party in this ongoing mystery of lost pieces. Sometimes this is very frustrating because now and then we see pieces coming up from which we think, we're suspicious that they are lost pieces from the collection, but we do not have legal instruments to lay any claims to these works. And if we would do so, we would also be vulnerable for legal suits. So we completely stay out of that. We accept the collection as it is today and try to, as thoughtfully and as good as possible, publicize that part of the collection, which is still the largest part, of course, that is left, and we take responsibility for that. But it's, now and then it is frustrating, yes.
But I think one of the projects probably for wider public, it could be really to make a movie about the story, because it's really, when you read it, I read so many letters, articles, because even the foundation was created with an interesting story. Can you tell just a few words, Khardjiyev, was it created by Khardjiyev actually, or it was created by, after his death? Because he when you're talking about legitimacy, was it created by the family, Khardjiyev Chaga, or later on it was created by the director, or a few words?
Yeah, a few words. I also, the exact judicial phrasing I do not know, but it was in Khardjiev's will. So that is for us the pivotal and fundamental piece. So he wanted to leave it in Amsterdam. That was in his will, and to have a specific legal entity, so this foundation, to take care of it. Of course, he went to Amsterdam for various reasons, but I think by far the most important reason was, of course, that the Stedelijk Museum already then held the most important collection of Malevich paintings outside of Russia. So he wanted to reconnect, obviously, with that collection to therefore create a still more important collection in the West, to internationalize the legacy of the avant-garde. So that is for us the fundamental piece. During the transition from the heritage into the foundation, all things went wrong, as you may have heard. The notary that played a very scandalous role in this process has lost his ability to work. He has become a persona non grata. He has paid fines, but he also, of course, knew loopholes in the law, so that he made sure that whatever he did, and we don't really know if he stole and if how much he stole, etc., etc., that he made sure that the Dutch law enforcement could not put him into jail. He had given fines, and he lost his notary. What's the? Yeah, exactly. So. And after that, we took it as, in a way, a new beginning. And from that moment on, we see, in a way, that is the real starting point of the foundation. And from that moment on, we started working with our colleagues at the Stedelijk Museum.
Thank you very much. Sorry for, trying to...
And I would like to make one more remark, because the difficulty is also with many of the stories that go around, there's an enormous amount of speculation going on. Many things went wrong, there obviously many scandalous things happened already before the moment when Kharchev decided to bring it over to the Netherlands, and after Kharchev's death and the transition from the heritage into the foundation. Still, most of it is speculation. And some of the stories I read were quite clear, completely fabricated. Mm-hmm. So we have to be very cautious with accepting too much speculation about what happened exactly with, the whole process from the smuggling till the arrival at the Stedelijk Museum. So a film, yes, it sometimes reads like a detective story, but the problem is that there is very little factual knowledge. If there would have been, the responsible people, of course, would have gone to jail. So the fact that the factual knowledge is not there makes it also a wonderful haven for people who love to speculate and to see criminal elements in everybody. So it is a problem for us, and we try as much as possible to concentrate on the wonderful artworks, the extremely important artworks that are in the foundation, and the way to make them accessible.
Thank you very much. I just used the chance to ask you.
Sure, that's okay.
Yeah, it's
and I
the
know
best.
that these questions are with
Yes.
many people, so it's good for me to answer them. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. Please, if you have questions. Yeah.
Actually, I have two. The first question is very simple. In your presentation, you showed only one painting, Suprematism of the Spirit, among other documents belonging to Kharchev's archive. Why you selected this particular piece?
By coincidence, because as I told at the beginning, my computer crashed and I had to didn't have access to my cloud, where I had a much more beautiful presentation prepared, and this was an image that I could pick up from the internet, and it is one of the masterpieces of the collection. So that's more or less the reason why. And you have a question for that,
yes,
I assume.
And the second question. We all know that the transition of the suitcases across the Soviet border was connected with a lot of, so to say, difficulties. Partly the suitcases were transported, partly they were arrested. Quite recently, those who are interested in this subject learned that partly the content of the suitcases arrested by the customs appeared on the market. And these documents were for sale. I presume they were sold eventually. Do you have any knowledge of the present status quo of this documentation? And if you do you have any contacts with the current owner? And if you don't, are you trying to trace them? Thank you.
Yes. Thank you. Yes, we are aware of this situation. We once made a decision that pieces, and also this counts for this as well, of part of the collection that would arise, we would not deal with, because the chances were very big that they were stolen. as I think happened with this particular collection as well. And as they are stolen, it becomes increasingly difficult for us to have a relationship with people who either owned this or now bought it, because the people who bought it also quite well known that these were stolen pieces. So you have to deal with thieves and people who buy from thieves. And though it is extremely frustrating, we keep distance from that. Especially also because of the history of the foundation, and that from the moment on that we see as a seizure, we do not want to have any kind of dealings with people who misused Kharjev's collection or his trust in any way. And as I said, it is extremely frustrating because these work exists. We even do have a list because it was given to us. We did not ask for it. We do have that. And we are also, I can whisper in your ears something if you would like. I don't know, maybe that there are things that you will know already, but in the end are sometimes frustrating, but also very clear point is that we do not engage in anything related to the Kharjev Foundation that is not part of our collection, because we never can know if it is legal property or not. So it is frustrating, but also very clear. Yep. Once more, I do not really understand. What is the distinction that you try to make?
Once you receive new documentation,
Okay. Yeah.
or not receive, but you are presented with the documentation, and you have a proof that this documentation originated legally from the hands of Kharjev to a third party, and now this third party suggests that you study this documentation. Will you work with this documentation, or the principle of not acceptance is universal for all cases?
Well, we haven't had. You talk about a situation where there is full proof of the legality. We haven't had that situation yet. So I cannot really answer, and I would be, it would be strange, I think, if there could be full proof, but if there is, then we have to reassess maybe our position. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. We, in 15 minutes, we will have a new presentation. Please, if you have any questions, we have our guests here. We can ask them as many questions as we want. They're still here in Kiev. And we are very grateful. It's, for us, it's very useful information. Probably I would ask one more question. What would you advise for the families of the artists if they want to create foundations in Ukraine? Probably one advice from each of the fund. First steps.
Get a good lawyer.
I was going to second that, actually, because we're not aware of the legality of the situation in Ukraine for setting up foundations, so it's very difficult for us to advise upon it.
First advice and say.
Yes, you draw up a very solid legal model so that when it is established, nobody or not tax collectors, not people with bad intentions can get to it. So it is also something I think that because of the fact that Ukraine, of course, only since 1991 has property rights more or less like in other European countries, that this needs to be established evolutionary. But it is something very important, because a solid legal instrument to contain heritages, art collections outside of government institutions is extremely important for a healthy art environment in a country. So, yeah.
Thank you very much. Probably one more question. What is the possibility, actually, to see, for instance, Archipenko Foundation exhibition in Kiev or a part of Harjiev collection in Kiev? Is it possible? Is it possible?
Please invite us and let's see what happens.
Okay. Yes. Thank you very much. We are glad that you come, and we have a short break. And in 15 minutes, we will have Oleg Elnitsky lecture. Please join us. It would be an interesting subject. Yes, a small break. Thank you.